Watch this.
Imagine not knowing if your bank accounts add up. That's essentially, in a very simplified way, where the state of Idaho stands after a new audit reveals serious gaps in tracking the state's money. The ballot this fall won't just decide leaders, it'll decide landscapes. Boise voters will weigh in on whether they want to chip in a little more to protect open space before it's lost to growth. The West might look endless and wild, but almost half of it is federally owned. So how did we end up with so much land in Uncle Sam's hands? The answer goes back 200 years. Idaho's transition to a new statewide accounting system resulted in more than $30 million of duplicate payments and hundreds of millions in accounting errors. This according to an audit. Now, the state of finances here in the Gem State has left auditors unable to verify the accuracy of billions in cash balances, and it's triggered qualified audit opinions across major state funds, meaning there are significant issues. And these new reports were presented to lawmakers on the Legislative Council, made up of the top legislative leaders, and they're expressing significant concern about the accuracy and state of Idaho's financial records. Audits also found duplicate payments and major money misstatements. Serious concerns from Idaho's top legislative leaders following new audits and financial reports into Idaho's system.
Where's the money?
The findings are detailed in reports released by legislative auditor April Renfro, and it takes a look at Idaho's financial controls following the July 2023 implementation of LUMA, a cloud-based business system that replaced Idaho's decades-old STARS mainframe.
We had 18 findings across 8 agencies. 11 of those findings were material weaknesses in internal control, and that speaks to the qualification. A material weakness is a deficiency or a combination of deficiencies in internal control over financial reporting, such that there is a reasonable possibility of a material misstatement that will go undetected or uncorrected, and we did identify material misstatements.
The core problem centers on Idaho's inability to properly track and document cash and investments following the new LUMA launch. The technical term we're following here is reconciliation. The Office of the State Controller discontinued their standard cash reconciliation procedures while implementing LUMA and have failed to establish replacement controls. This leaves auditors unable to verify that pooled cash balances, totaling in the billions, are materially accurate.
The question I have then, so did we ever find out how to make those numbers match? Or are we still just, we don't know whether they're reconciled, we don't know that they balance or not, it's just sitting out there? What happened?
So to the point of the speaker, has this been, for lack of a better term, reconciled? Have we fixed the problem? And like he said, do we know where the money is? And how do we fix this, and who's doing it?
Ms. Renfro.
Pro Tem and Senator Wintrow, it's my opinion that it is not fixed yet, and it cannot be fixed until the state completes that reconciliation monthly, and until they go back and complete it all the way back to July 2023. That's the only way we're going to know for sure that the records in LUMA are accurate. So, I mean, that's my answer to it. I think, we make some assumptions based on the totals amount and the total amount here, but it's a scary position, which is why we qualified our opinion on it, because I don't feel like we can verify it. So I think that's why our recommendation is that they reconcile those balances by fund all the way back to the start of the implementation year.
Auditors emphasize that while all material misstatements, some listed here, they were corrected before the final annual comprehensive financial report was put out, but the systemic control failures indicate ongoing risk.
Well, that's the problem. We're being quiet about this, right? In December of 2023, when we started saying this isn't working, we need to make sure. Now we're getting to a position that goes back to what the Pro Tem talked about with your credit rating, right? I mean, if you can't reconcile your checkbook at home, you had a problem. We can't reconcile our checkbook with the state, and we haven't since 2023. This is a problem, guys. We can sit here and look at each other and say, well, let's get over and go to lunch, but something's got to be fixed.
Is it your opinion that they are taking the findings of this audit as seriously as the legislators around this table?
I do think that they've tried lots of different things to fix it. I think they take it seriously in that we've had a lot of meetings since December of 2023 about this particular issue. It leads me to a place where I would normally say for an agency, they either can't or they don't want to do this. And I don't think it's that they don't want to, but now I'm scared that it's that they can't do the reconciliation to the level we need it to be done, because they've hired people and they've had people working on it. It's not that they're not trying, but it's also not working. We're not making progress. So I am concerned about that.
November is about a month away, and Boise voters are about to be asked for money. Not for a new stadium, not for roads, this time for a little less pavement and a little more preservation. It's called the Clean Water and Open Space Levy, and as Hunter Funk explains, the city says it would keep the foothills wild, the rivers cleaner, and the trails growing, if you're willing to pay for it.
Boise loves its outdoors. And come November, voters will decide if they love it enough to open their wallets just a bit more.
The city is requesting an $11 million levy to go towards parks acquisition and development, pathways connections, also clean water projects, and new to this levy, which wasn't in the previous two levies, is fire mitigation efforts as well.
The proposal, if passed, is a 2-year levy. It would be an estimated average annual cost of $9.89 per $100,000 of taxable assessed value per year. That's about $40 a year for the average homeowner in Boise, and includes the homeowner's exemption. As Holloway said, this isn't Boise's first rodeo when it comes to levies. Boise voters approved 2 levies to fund Boise foothills property purchases, support clean air and water, and preserve park property in growing areas of the city. The first foothills levy was approved in 2001 and led to land preservation actions that have shaped recreation and promoted the protection of wildlife in Boise's backyard. Then in November of 2015, a resounding majority of Boise voters approved a second $10 million levy to support the preservation of open space and habitat, along with supporting clean water improvement projects in the Boise foothills, along the Boise River, and in open space sites throughout the city. This new one includes even more.
Yeah, and that's why the language becomes a little more broader because the needs of the city are changing. And since 2021 to 2025, our city's evolved. It's changed dramatically. We have not only a 10-minute walk initiative that has come to fruition through that period of time, but we also have a Pathways Master Plan that was adopted by the City Council 2 years ago. And so that has over 100 miles worth of potential trail connections. That wasn't in 2001 or in 2015. So as the city has changed, and as funding in our capital fund becomes more and more difficult to allocate to projects like this, is the reasoning why the mayor and city council is looking at doing a levy.
City leaders say without this levy, growth keeps coming, but funding in open space doesn't.
Our citizens have told us loud and clear that they want to see open space, they want to see more park space, they want to see projects related to that quality of life piece, the recreational component to parks and recreation. So, again, because land is so hard to come by, when we can get it, we need to get it.
And the goal is preserving it. Critics worry about taxes going up again, but Holloway says if the levy doesn't get passed, projects compete with police, fire, and housing for general fund dollars. And impact fees, the city's main funding source for these, only grow when new development does.
So the concept with impact fees is it pays for growth. So the more growth in a planning area, the more impact fees we collect, and the more things we can do from a park and park development perspective. Unfortunately, in a lot of the areas within those planning areas, growth is completely built out. And so there's not a lot of opportunity to collect additional impact fees in order to continue to make headway on our 10-minute walk initiative, in order to make headway on some of the park properties we currently have that need to be built out per their master plan. We don't have the capital dollars from a general fund standpoint to do that because our capital plan is driven by those impact fees.
If passed, it would expand outdoor recreation opportunities starting in 2026.
And that's why people live here, and there just simply isn't the funding that's available in our capital plan to continue to stay ahead of not only the growth, but really the expectation of our citizens. So yes, it does increase taxes, but at the same time, it's providing for that future generation. And all you need to do is look at what has occurred with those 2 levies in our community. And again, we anticipate to see the same type of occurrence with the next levy as well.
And if you live in Boise, this will be on your ballot in November. And voters can either say yes to approving it or no to denying the levy.
And it's a very important indication here. If you live in Boise, you will get to vote on this. I know sometimes there'll be people that live out in the Ada County area that don't want to say. This is for the city of Boise voters.
Yes. If you're in Meridian, sorry.
Yeah, okay, very good.
Yep.
Something to track. What are we, I guess, a little more than a month away from November. All right, Hunter
Countdown.
Funk. Thank you. We'll be right back. From the BLM to the Forest Service, federal agencies manage millions of acres in Idaho. But the roots of their control go all the way back to America's first land policies. Okay, so this is the part of the program where you get to chime in. See something interesting in our show? Tell us what you think, or really anything about our community. Send us a text to 208-321-5614. Please be sure to include your name and hashtag the 208. Clean, clever, concise, we like those. And you never know if your comment may end up on screen at the end of the show. People from around the world flock to the Gem State and other western states to see its natural beauty. But the land, how it's managed and who controls it, has been a decades-long debate. One thrust back into the national spotlight recently. The story behind the massive federal footprint in the West dates back centuries to westward expansion, failed homesteads, and a patchwork of land deals that created the complex system we live in today. Over the past few months, KTVB, we have spoken with elected officials, historians, business owners, and conservation groups to get a better understanding about our public lands and how they came to be the way they are, and why many are fighting to keep them in public hands. We'll be sharing those stories with you all week here on the 208. We'll start with Morgan Romero, Battleground, Idaho's land wars.
When you picture the American West, you probably imagine wild, wide open spaces, right? Well, here's something that might surprise you. About half of all that land is actually owned by the federal government, AKA you, the American people. So how did we end up owning so much of the West? Well, it all goes back to how America grew. Back in the 1800s, we started expanding from the East Coast, buying huge chunks of land, winning territory in wars, taking tribal land by force, and making deals with other countries. The thing is, when we acquired all this Western land, there weren't any states to take ownership. So the federal government had to manage millions and millions of acres. It created an agency called the General Land Office to survey, give away and sell off these massive territories.
I think a lot of people are familiar with the idea of homesteading. So that was a way a lot of lands were disposed of that had been formerly federal. Also grants to railroads, also land grants to states as they entered statehood, withdrawals of lands for military bases, also the creation of national forests and national parks. Those all came then out of what was formerly public lands.
Congress passed the Homestead Act in 1862, basically saying, hey, if you want free land, come west, live on it, and farm it. But a lot of western land wasn't exactly prime real estate. Too dry for farming, too remote, or too mountainous. Many homesteading claims failed when settlers discovered they couldn't make a living. The federal government ended up holding on to land nobody wanted, or nobody could successfully settle. By the 1930s, homesteading was essentially over.
I think there's three reasons. One is the practical matter of the lands that are left by the beginning of the 20th century are regarded as marginal lands, not suitable for farming. Two is there's this longer history of fraud and abuse and misuse of both land as well as land distribution acts, where people say this is not the idea. You know, we're having thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of acres being consolidated into private hands and abused, and that's not right. And then third, by the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century, you have this growing movement for conservation, which calls for protecting these lands for the interests of the American people.
And the federal government became responsible for doing that on behalf of Americans.
It's set aside as land managed by the federal government for a variety of different purposes, including forest management, rangeland management. Franklin Roosevelt does a temporary withdrawal of the public lands from further distribution and sale, and that is more or less finalized in 1976 with the Federal Land Policy Management Act.
And that really set the stage for what BLM's mission is. And that included deciding at that point to largely stop the disposal of public lands and retain the remaining lands in federal ownership, and to manage those lands for multiple use, for the use of people today as well as into the future.
And what does multiple use mean exactly?
Well, multiple use includes using public lands for their natural resource values, for wildlife habitat, plant habitat, cultural resources, as well as uses like livestock grazing, forestry, recreation, transmission lines for energy, mineral development.
The Bureau of Land Management was born out of the old General Land Office and the U.S. Grazing Service. Today, the BLM and the Forest Service manage most of the federal land in the West. And here in Idaho, the federal footprint is especially large, with nearly 2/3 of the state owned and managed by the feds. Idaho ranks 4th nationally for land owned by the federal government. While the BLM mostly oversees rangeland, sagebrush steppe, and desert canyons in Idaho, the Forest Service manages mountain forests, alpine peaks, and wilderness areas. The agency also balances multiple uses. In addition to recreation access and wildlife habitat conservation, it manages timber harvest, protects watersheds and wilderness, and manages wildfires. The National Park Service, Fish and Wildlife Service, Bureau of Reclamation, and Department of Defense oversee hundreds of thousands of acres, but have a much smaller footprint. You might be asking, what about state-owned land? Well, state land isn't public land. Are you ready for another history lesson? When Idaho became a state in 1890, the federal government gave Idaho over 3.5 million acres for institutions like public schools and universities.
The federal government gave the state land as a way of providing an ongoing stream of revenue, essentially.
Because the state is constitutionally mandated to make the most money it can for these institutions, Idaho started selling and leasing lands in the early 1900s.
Land that was given to the state is managed for production, for financial return, and in some of those instances they decide that the way to make the most money is to sell it.
Today, the state owns 2.5 million acres of endowment land, just 5% of the state. So over the decades, land was carved up and handed out. Some stayed federal, some went to the new state of Idaho, some went to private hands, all for different reasons, all at different times. The result? Our state looks like a giant checkerboard. Federal forests here, private ranches there, state lands scattered in between. It's a complex legacy of America's westward expansion, one that still shapes how we live, work, and play today.
Join us every day this week on the 208 as we explore the history and the debate over state versus federal land management and how that impacts the land we enjoy here in Idaho. And tomorrow, we'll have a further look at state land. Is it all public land for all to use? Not so fast. As you heard Morgan say, it's a parcel with a purpose.
Well, it is a first alert weather day today because some changes coming in tonight, late overnight, and then lasting through tomorrow morning. So we could see an impacted week overall, but the brunt force of that action is going to be later this evening. That's because we have a cold front coming through. That's going to trigger rain and storm activity. Then throughout the week, another cold front. So a separate system will then kick off cooler weather and continue that unsettled pattern. But right now we're already seeing some of that action. You can see the Magic Valley seeing some rain showers, but they have also had some thunderstorms occur. Meanwhile, eastern Oregon seeing some widespread thunderstorming as well. Treasure Valley hasn't quite seen anything yet aside from cloud cover, but that will soon change later this evening, probably around 8 p.m. or so, because this is that cold front that's approaching southwest Idaho right now. It's still moving through Washington and Oregon in the Pacific Northwest, bringing showers before it and after it. But then you can see this second cold front shortly following behind it. That's what's going to continue to move through later this work week and then bring some longer lasting changes. But for this evening, for the time being, you can see these spotty showers slowly but surely become more widespread. This is by 10 p.m. tonight. You can see most of western Idaho seeing some pretty widespread and heavy hitting rain. So the red, the orange colors, those are showing heavier pockets of rainfall and storm activity. Overnight, this is 4 a.m. You can see that purple color that is showing the possibility possibility of snow tonight. So snow could be falling in those highest mountain peak elevations. Tomorrow, things will kind of trickle on and off throughout the day, but by evening hours, things become much more widespread again. Most of it looks like it will stick in the Magic Valley tomorrow. So tonight, Treasure Valley could be hit a little bit harder. Tomorrow, Tuesday night, is when Magic Valley may see some of those bigger impacts. We could see anywhere from ½ an inch or 3/4 of an inch of rain tonight or in the next 24 hours for measurable rain. So we still have a chance at seeing isolated showers and spotty storms in Boise and the Treasure Valley tomorrow, lasting through the evening. By Wednesday, things look to dry off a little bit, but those rain chances do come back towards the end of the week on Thursday. Temperatures will continue to drop through the end of the weekend, beginning of next week, looking at highs in the low 60s.
All right, let's look at some of your comments to end the half hour. Doug Holloway is a national treasure. His impact will be felt for a long time. Ken in Boise. Ken, I agree. He retires basically a month from tomorrow, so we'll keep him hard at work until his departure date. Evan in Ada County writes, we are blessed to have public land in Idaho. Keep a grip on it. Yes, and this public land, state lands special continue all week here on the 208. And then Jim in Canyon County writes, what a great piece on our public lands. This is why I'm locked onto the 208. Me too. Morgan, Sam, and the team did a great job on that piece. More great content this week on the 208.
Continue with us and watch free now on the KTVB Plus app everywhere you stream.